My dear friends in Christ, as the Triduum approaches, we think of the Lord entering into his passion. But before he entered into his passion, he had his Last Supper with his friends. On Palm Sunday, I read as my homily a passage from Charles Péguy's The Mystery of the Charity of Joan of Arc, reflecting on the Passion. Today I want to also read to you a passage from that same work on Joan of Arc, and it's entitled, Did His Friends Love Him? On the Mystery of Holy Thursday. Did his friends love him as much as his enemies hated him? His Father knew. His disciples did not defend him so much as his enemies pursued him. Did his disciples love him as much as his enemies hated him? His Father knew. His apostles did not defend him so much as his enemies pursued him. Did his apostles love him as much as his enemies hated him? His Father knew. Did the 11 love him as much as the 12th hated him? Did the 11 love him as much as the 12th had betrayed him? His Father knew. His Father knew. What then was man, that man whom he had come to save, whose nature he had put on? He did not know. As man he did not know, because no man knows man, because a man's life, a human life as man, is not sufficient to know man. So great is he, and so small, so high up and so low. What then was man, that man, whose nature he had put on? His Father knew. And those soldiers who had arrested him, who had taken him from judgment hall to judgment hall, and from judgment hall to public square, and those executioners who had crucified him, people who went about their work, those soldiers who cast dice, who divided his clothes, who cast dice for his clothes, who drew lots for his robe, they were those who even so bore no grudge against him. That 30 years of hard work and 3 years of hard work, that 30 years in retreat and 3 years in public, 30 years in his family and 3 years among the people, 30 years in the workshop and 3 years in public, 3 years of public life and 30 years of private life, had not crowned 30 years of private life and 3 years of public life, since it had yet needed the crowning of that death, since it needed the fulfilling of that martyrdom, since it needed the attestation of that testimony, since it needed the consummation of that martyrdom and of that death, since it had needed the completion of that 3-day agony, since it needed the exhausting of that supreme agony and of that horrifying anguish, and the descent from the cross and the burial, the 3 days in the sepulchre, the 3 days in the tomb, the 3 days in limbo, until the resurrection, and the strange post-mortem life, the pilgrims at Emmaus, the ascension on the 40th day, since it had to be. For the Son of God knew that the sufferings of the Son of Man are unable to save the damned, and going mad with despond even more than they, dying Jesus wept over the forsaken, mad with the common despond.